Hi, I'm Dan from Beatmatch Guru, and today we're going to look into how to DJ house music. Like and subscribe to the channel. Okay, step number one, I would say the first thing is to look at the genres and subgenres of house music. That's really important because it is actually broken down quite a bit. So my advice would be to go over to track source, for example, and what you can do is from there is find a lot of different subgenres to get a flavour for what you like. Now, I don't mean to be patronising, but you might already know about house music and you can skip this bit. But there are so many different subgenres that work well together, and going on to track source and also Beatport can work really well for you. So here we have like deep house, soulful house, afro house, new disco. But my favourites are the soul and funk disco. I tend to blend that into maybe some new disco and soulful house. And then when it wants to get a bit deeper, throw in some deep house, get the energy flowing a bit different. So notice I said the word energy. So a lot of this house music is really to do with the energy. And so like, say for example, soul and funk, disco sounds, they can really get the vibe like very happy and uplifted. But when you're playing a different type of set, maybe later in the night in a club or bar, for example, you may want to revert to some more deeper house or more bassline heavy, more harder hitting sounds. So that's really where you can sort of research onto track source and get a flavour for what sort of sounds that you really want to go for and be known for as a DJ. I think that's really important. Number two is looking at beat structure. So I've done a tutorial before on drum and bass, and the beat structures are very different, whereas house music is actually pretty simplistic. So every beat there will be a kick. So 1, 2, 3, 4. On each of those counts there will be a kick drum. And subsequently every other, so on the 2 and the 4, there usually is a snare. Sometimes it's not always a snare involved, it might be a clap, for example, but the idea is the same. So the point being with DJing house music is pretty easy in comparison to some other genres such as drum and bass. So what you'll find is that when you're learning to beat match, you'll find that it is actually so much easier. You know where you stand, you know that there's going to be a beat on the 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the track that you're queuing up to then mix and blend into this other channel here. So if you're playing live here, you know that you're going to be counting on the 1 and the 2 and the 3 and the 4. And it's very simplistic, and I think there are some other areas that can really fit you, so that's what we're going to go into now. Number 3 is phrase matching. So you may be thinking, what is phrase, or what is phrase matching in music? Really what a phrase is in music, and especially house music, is a section of beats combined together which makes a chorus, a verse, a breakdown or a build up. So the reason for this is, well, the reason why you need to know this is because you really want to be mixing the phrase from one track and match it with the other. So the build-ups or the end of the phrase, you might get like a little drum fill, for example, and that is like a notification that you're moving on to the next section, which you may be going from the chorus to the verse. And that really does help with transitioning and blending from one track to the other. And we'll go into Ableton now because I've just highlighted a few tracks or a few phrases in which to help you. So what you can see here is there's 2 tracks. So if we zoom out, this Lorenz Road track here, say for example, this has been playing to your audience already. So it's been playing out live through the speakers. And this track here, this Hey track, you're getting ready to queue up. So what I've done here is split them into sections. So this is what it visually looks like if you're looking at different phrases. So this one here is the breakdown. So you can see here the the audio wave's quite high, so it's been playing like bass line with the beat, etc. Nice funky house track. And then you can see the wave go down a bit, and that's indication of it being like the breakdown and then back up into the build up. But as you can see, it's building up. So what I've highlighted here is this red section here is the drop. So that's like the chorus and that's the verse, and that's sort of like this part of the outro, which I'll come into a second because it's really important to know this bit. So when you're mixing, it's really important to know these phrases. So you want to try and match these up with other tracks, as I mentioned. So this breakdown here, you can start and you'll play this. So this will be your first cue point right at the beginning of this intro. So you can see it's very percussive and it's very light in the waveform. And then the next section, you'll know that if you've beat matched this correctly, you'll see that the red here will be matched up with this green here, which is part of the intro, and maybe like the kick drum is slightly more bassier, and you'll hear it kick in. And at the end of this section here, you'll hear a slight bit of a drum fill, which will notify you going into the verse, for example. But on the hey track, this lighter green with the lighter red, this will be the next phrase. So as long as you've got the beat match, the beats aligned, and you've got the tempos matched, which is a completely different tutorial, by the way, but that is the key to making sure you're mixing and blending the tracks really well. Number 4 is looking at cue points and markers to really help you identify on each individual track that you've got in your music collection, say it be on Rekordbox or Serato, for example. This will help you distinguish where individual phrases might trigger. So that's why it's really important to use cue points to then figure out and plan ahead and figure out where your phrases are. So that makes your life a bit easier. When you're visually looking at Rekordbox, you can then see where the beginning of the drop is. That's probably the chorus, and then next where it kicks into the verse, maybe more of a percussive section, and then you've set a marker point there. So let's quickly look into Rekordbox, and I'll show you how I do that. So you can see here on the Lorenz Road track, you can see here, that is the beginning of another drop in the track. So in house music, there's a couple of drops, it seems. So you've got a drop here, and there's a few breakdowns there as well, mini breakdowns. And what I've done is at the intro of the Till West Defunct Hey track, you can see what I've done is put a marker of where I want to set the cue point. So you can see that yellow orangey arrow there, that's where I've set the cue point. So if I was to press the cue here, you can see I'm cueing that up, ready to match in line with the drop. And so that's really helpful, because then I can see where I need to start cueing and then beat match with the tempo glider here, and then start blending. So on that point of blending, see, I've actually put a marker here, which I'm not using necessarily as a cue point, but this B here matches up with the B here. So that for me is a signifier to say, okay, that's where you want to start blending in and moving the crossfader from the Lorenz Road track over to the Hey track. So this is where I start blending over. And what's really cool is that in house, sometimes you don't need to go from one main section like a chorus and blend into like a heavy hitting outro. Sometimes it's quite nice to blend in the breakdowns of each different track as well. So that's what I've done here in these two tracks as an example. So tip number 5 is to do with the EQing and the crossfader. So what you'll see is on this DDJ 400 by Pioneer, this is my pride and joy. I love this. This is a well-worthy investment if you're looking to get a DJ controller in your life. So what's really important when you're mixing and blending from one track to the other, it's really important to know that you've got the crossfader, which is the basic element, so you're going from one track to the other. But what can really help and accompany this is using the EQs. So there are different techniques that they can use, but one of the key things is to using the low frequencies. So you can turn this down when you're like halfway through. So if you're fading out from the Lorenz Road track, for example, into the Hay track, then you can start cutting out the frequencies. And so if you want to cut out the bass and let the bass come through on this one, you cut the bass frequencies from here and let this one be more prominent and stand out to the audience who's listening, and they'll be like, oh, okay, the Hay track's coming through. And then what you can also do is then start to use the mid EQ, which will take out more of like the Rhodes or the piano sounds and blend them out and let the sort of like the main hook or the chorusy melody come through on the Hay track. And then if you want to start blending out the cymbals, etc. like that, that's when you can use the high frequency and start blending that out. And in conjunction with that, whilst you're doing all of this EQing and turning it down slowly and smoothly, then you can start moving the crossfader over to the track, and then you're good. One final tip before we go is harmonic mixing. So what's really interesting with house music is the key. So harmony is the same as key, so it's individual tracks have a different key in terms of like the chords and the bass lines that they're playing. And what's important to know is that individual tracks work really well together. So each individual key might be compatible, some are not compatible, and that's not like a hard and fast rule, but some tracks you might mix purely based on like the rhythm of like the bongos in the back of the track or something like that. There may be some really good ways to mix and blend, so harmonic mixing is not the hard and fast rule, but it does really help out. So if we go to Rekordbox here, I've noticed recently they are highlighting the individual tracks with the key with a green marker. So what that means is that they're just trying to help you out here by saying, okay, well, Lorenz Road is D flat minor, and the A flat minor of this Matt Zo track you could then drag and drop onto the other side, and then you could start mixing that, and it may sound, well, it's more than likely to sound really good when you start mixing and blending it together. So yeah, give it a go. The secondary tip related to that is that there's a service or a sort of an app that you can add onto your computer and your DJ software called Mixed in Key, and that's very, very popular, so you can check that out and experiment, and we might even do another video on that. So yeah, that's how to mix house music in a nutshell. So I'm really hoping that that's given you sort of the basics and the background into house music and getting stuck in. Like the video, subscribe to Beatmatch Guru, and on that point, go and check out Beatmatch Guru, the website, and we'll see you next time.